Hey there, folks. It's James at the Back Nine Live coming to you with the second part of my Never Forget Teed Off podcast about my remembrance of September 11th, 2001. Last week was the first part. If you missed that, then you can go back into my library and find it. What I will do is I'll be going through the rest of that day as I remember it, as I recall it, and then I'll get into some ways that relates to where we are at today in a lot of ways. It was 7 o'clock. Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. The first tower had just fallen. We had been watching on TV. There was about, maybe half a dozen people in my apartment at this time in West Hollywood, California. As I said, we were all speechless. You were in a fantasy land at this point. You couldn't believe that tower just fell. But as it fell, and we watched, nobody was talking, but one of the things that did creep in your mind, even though you couldn't really think about anything, is you automatically knew that the second tower was going to fall. And you knew that there were people inside there. You knew that there were firefighters inside there. You knew there were still workers inside there. You knew everybody around the ground level there was now covered in concrete dust and couldn't see. As I said, your mind was kind of blank, but you were just on edge, waiting for that second one to come down. And then 35 minutes later or something, it came down too. And I remember watching, and the top of the tower went kind of crooked. It didn't come down straight like the other one did. And again, that took forever. It took forever for it to fall. You couldn't believe it. Once it said, it was so surreal, so surreal. As the second one came down, my girlfriend had showed up. We were on the couch together. And then my roommate Tom, his girlfriend, showed up. We had a couple other neighbors over. It was now, by the time the second one fell, I think there was, a dozen people, maybe 15 people in our apartment. Because like I said, nobody wanted to be alone. And we were just there. And after the second one fell, that's whenever you heard some people crying. People that were there. We lived in L.A. Nobody came from L.A. Everybody was imported from somewhere else, and a lot of people had friends that were in New York that they couldn't get in touch with at that point. A lot of them had friends that worked downtown, worked down around the towers. So nobody knew what was going on. We still didn't know if LA was going to be attacked as well, or if some other U.S. city was going to be attacked. At this point, nobody knew where our president was. George Bush was flying around on Air Force One somewhere. And I think we were also learning about Flight 93 that was hijacked as well and going somewhere. We had no idea where. People were pretty much silent. They were kind of, oh my gods, and I can't believe this. And people, like I said, crying a little. It stayed that way for a good 4 hours. And I remembered me consciously thinking, and finally my brain, it kicks back in, and spark plugs start to work a little bit in there. And I kind of look around the room, and what I saw was myself, a good old country boy, my roommate Tom, who was a kind of a classical rock musician, long hair, our next door neighbor Ben, who was a heavy metal bass player and in a pretty popular band. He made his living going on tour. Him, big old hoop earrings, tattoos everywhere, all up his neck, on his face. My buddy Sammy, who his ethnicity was Persian, or somewhere around Iran, somewhere around there. My buddy Prince, who was a gay black man. My girlfriend, who was a Polish, prim and proper kind of girl. My buddy Tom's girlfriend, who was a surfer girl from down and around Huntington Beach. Next door neighbors who were kind of hippies were there. And that's what I saw. I saw a whole diverse set of people that were all together in one thing. They were living through something together. It was almost like a team of people, and we were all so close. Like plays whenever kids are scared to death, like first graders, kindergartners doing their first child play. They're scared to death, and they'll start to migrate towards each other on a stage. This is what was happening unconsciously, or like, dare I say, like cattle whenever they are spooked. You could see that, and you could sense that. And it felt like unity. It felt like we were all doing this together, and that somehow we would get through this together. And it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And that lasted until the first time they showed people in another country celebrating. That was the first point that somebody in the room said, we're going to kill all you people. He wasn't as nice, but somebody had said it. And I looked consciously over at my buddy Sammy. He looked at me, and we didn't have to say anything. We could feel it. You could feel that the hatred was starting to come in. My buddy Prince felt the same way. I could feel it too, because all of a sudden he and Sammy were uncomfortable, and they were like, well, we're going to get out of here. What was going through my mind was the night before, whenever I was being chased by these ignorant skinheads, that they just looked at me and they immediately assumed something about me. And I knew that they were going to assume it. So I was judging them the same way they're judging me. But I automatically knew, I was like, okay, whoever just said this stuff is being a little ignorant, and they're going to judge people they shouldn't judge, innocent people. I mean, my buddy Sammy, he wasn't from the Middle East. He was born and raised in Detroit, but he looked Arab. He had the features to him. So he was like, well, man, he's like, hey, I'm going to go home. He's like, Jim, come walk with me. I was like, yeah, man, I'll come walk with you. And Prince was the same way. He knew that he was going to be targeted, because you just don't target the one ethnicity. Whenever hate starts to come in, you start to target everything about people, about different people. And so all this unity we felt for the few hours before, you could feel it start to go away. It's like a Hunter S. Thompson saying, hey, the wave came up and you saw the high water mark, and then it crashed and it went back in the sea. That's what it felt like that very same day. And it was amazing to me that we could not hang on to that unity longer than that, but we didn't. So I was like, yeah, man, I'll walk you home. So we walked back. We didn't really talk about anything. We went to Prince's house first, and he was kind of like, yeah, you guys going to go up to the Yay coaching horses tonight, have a beer? We're like, we don't know, maybe, who knows? You kind of felt, we knew we were all friends, but you could feel the difference coming between us, that you were all brainwashed in a certain way growing up or whatnot, if you get what I'm saying. I walked Sammy home same way. He didn't really say anything. He just said, things are going to change a lot now. This was like the worst thing that's ever happened in the history of the world. And Sammy was such an American. He was such a patriot. He loved America. He's just like, this is terrible. And he's like, people are just going to start to be nasty about stuff. And I'm like, nah, man. I was like, country's going to come together and we're going to do good things. And I went back to my apartment. My buddy Tom, my roommate, he had slid it off into his room with his girlfriend. You could feel people now were no longer trying to come close together. They were starting to pull apart, and they didn't really want to be around each other anymore. And this was, at this point, this was about 3:30, I guess. It was right around whenever the Tower 7 fell, the other tower. And that's what I was feeling too. I told my girlfriend, I was like, hey man, let's get out of here. I was like, I can't watch this TV anymore. I knew that everybody was watching TV this day. I was like, well, let's go down to the beach. So we get in the car, and yeah, there's nobody really on the roads. We drive down to Manhattan Beach. Get out of the car, and we go out on the beach, and she's just kind of laying on me, and we're sitting just watching the ocean. And we decide that it's probably a good night to just watch the sunset and think about things and hold each other and, ponder what's going to happen in life. And that's whenever she said, what's going to happen now? She asked me that genuinely. I could tell she was still scared. She still had a lot of friends in New York because she was from New Jersey. What's going to happen now? And I just remember looking out, and my exact words to her were, now we're going to make a bunch of mistakes. And that's all I said to her. But I was looking out over the ocean, and all I could think about is that place way off over on the other side of that thing, land way off in the middle of nowhere, that we were going to go there and we were going to kill a bunch of people. Knew it. We were going to destroy a lot of people's homes. We were going to displace a lot of people from their homes. We were going to kill fathers and make more terrorists out of young kids. We were going to have soldiers coming back without arms and without legs, and traumatized, post-traumatic stress. We knew it. I knew it. This was what was going through my mind at this point, and I just got very, very sad that, and felt very helpless that I could not do anything about it in this world. That we were going to just revert back to the way the world's always been. And that's what I'm saying. The day didn't change us. It changed us for about 3 hours. For 3 hours, we were totally united as people in this country. And then we just started to revert back to the same mistakes that the world has made for a very long time. How does this relate to today? Like I said, for those 3 hours, we felt so united, and then it just started to go downhill. That very day, the division started to happen. The next day, there was already people protesting against war, against doing anything about it. But that day was whenever it really reverted back. And we pretty much have gone for 24 years of moving in a direction that is very much dangerous. Getting into this Charlie Kirk thing, and like I said, I'm not trying to get political because I didn't know Charlie Kirk. I didn't follow him. I didn't even know who he really was until he was assassinated. And that's a tragic, tragic thing. That should never happen. Never. But it does. It happens all the time. And it's happened so many times throughout history. I don't believe either side could disagree. Left, right, center, any race, ethnicity, whatever. Nobody can deny that we are moving in a dangerous direction. We will look back in hindsight if we keep moving in this direction and say we should have just stopped this, nipped this in the bud right here. And so now you say, how do you do that? Well, you take away the guns. No, you don't take away the guns. Well, you take away the freedoms of speech. No, you don't take away the freedoms of speech. Well, you take away the press. No, you don't take away the press. You take away the social media, the video games. No, that is not how you do it. How you do it is you really got to change your mindset. We've got to change our mindset, all of us. At some point, we got to realize that taking away other people's freedoms in order to try to justify our own rights is not a recipe for success. What we as a citizenship need to understand is that our forefathers were wrong in the language that they put into the Constitution. They shouldn't have said we have the right to things. Because if you say right, then automatically it seems like it's a gift given to you by somebody. And if it's a gift given to you by somebody, then you're taking advantage of it. You're taking it for granted. You're taking it as an entitlement. In our schools, we shouldn't be teaching that these are rights. It's not a right to free speech. It's a privilege of free speech. And a privilege brings responsibility with it. It's not a right to bear arms. It is actually a burden to bear arms. And you need not take it lightly. It's not a right for freedom of religion. It's another obligation to practice that religion with integrity. If you view all these things as obligations, as something that you have to earn, something that you are so responsible for, then that's whenever freedom lives. That's whenever democracy lives. Is whenever not only do you see it as an obligation, it is my obligation to protect that freedom, not only for myself, but for my neighbor. It's my obligation to protect my right to vote for not only myself, but for my neighbor. Whenever it comes to this Charlie Kirk thing, the kid shooting him, was it his right to have a gun? Yes, but it should have been his obligation. Was it Charlie Kirk's right to have freedom of speech? Yes, but it's also an obligation. So it was terrible. It was a tragedy. You never want to see anything like that. You feel so awful. I feel so awful for his family. I feel so awful for the kid's family that shot him. You got to realize that hate, this is what it breeds. And there's just going to be more of it until we can learn to protect rights for our neighbors and understand that it is our obligation, our responsibility to protect these rights for everybody, for our neighbors, and especially whenever we don't agree with them. All right, that's about as close as I will ever get to being a political affiliation around here. I would tell jokes about both sides and stuff like that, but I will not be getting into the hardcore dramatic side of any of this because it's not what I'll do. But I see voting as an obligation. It's a burden that I have to carry. I see carrying my guns as a burden. It's something I have to carry. It's an obligation. What I say, I definitely see it as an obligation because I do know that I'm putting this out on the internet now and I can slip up and say some things and I can't in any way determine how somebody will take anything I say. We've seen that on the internet before. And some people, like I said, it's not mental illness. Mental illness hate is not mental illness. Hate is a choice, and it's a bad choice. And if we keep going down this route, this country is in trouble. History has proven it time and time again. Anyway, thanks for joining me. That's the second part of the Never Forget Teed Off podcast. We're going to get back into the regular news next week and hopefully get into a bit more of the sarcasm and stuff like that. But I did want to address this. Wanted to get into this, and I'm happy I did this one. If you like the content, go ahead and hit subscribe. Thanks a lot. If you missed the first part of this, then that episode is right here, right below it. Logo that you can just hit subscribe. And I'll see you guys next week.